raise your hand if you think that you make friends very easily. Okay. Friendship is a precious gift, really precious gift from God. And in a moment I'll be relating a story, but first I'd like to mention that I grew up in the 60s and 70s, a very tumultuous time. But when you're growing up, you don't really realize how tumultuous it is because you don't know anything different. So there were things that happened, such as presidential assassinations or murders, and Martin Luther King assassination, as well as other positive things like the Beatles. There was Woodstock, maybe that's positive or negative, depending on whether you lived in Bethel, New York. And also, there was some other, well, there was the hippie movement, there was free love, and there was also Watergate in the 70s. I kind of remember growing up watching the hearings for that. Pretty exciting stuff, I'll tell you. It's kind of the precursor to C-SPAN, I think, nowadays. And also there was something called the Vietnam War. I remember the Vietnam War pretty distinctly because I was 17 when the draft ended. So I got pretty close to being drafted for Vietnam. And the war was becoming more and more unpopular as it went on, so I wasn't looking forward to being drafted at all, because it just didn't seem like a good situation to get into. And this particular story has to do with a veteran, someone who's coming back from the Vietnam War, and his name is Bobby. And he just arrives back from the Vietnam War in San Francisco, and he's going to fly to his parents. So he calls his mom and dad, and he says, "Mom and Dad, I'm finally home. I finally arrived back in the States." And they say, "Son, we're really proud of you. You served your country well. We really think you did a great job. We can't wait to see you." And he said, "Mom and Dad, I got one favor to ask you. Is it okay if I bring a friend home with me?" And they say, "Sure. We'd love to have this person. We'll make him feel welcome." And then he says, "There's something else I'd like to add. This friend was injured in the war, and during the fighting. He stepped on a landmine, and he lost an arm and a leg." And his dad said, "Oh, we're really starting to hear about that. We'll make sure that he feels comfortable, that he feels welcome in our house." Then he says, "Well, he has no place else to live, so I'd like him to come to live with us because he's a friend of mine." And then there was a moment of silence. And finally his dad said, "Son, you don't really realize what you're asking. Someone with such a handicap will be a burden on us, and we really have our own lives to live. And I think that this fellow that you've met, I think that you should really kind of let him go his own way, because he'll be able to find some place to stay on his own. I think it's best if you really don't come back with this person." And at that point, their son just hung up the phone. And about 2 days later, they receive a phone call from the San Francisco police saying that their son, Bobby, was dead. And they were told that he fell out of a tall building, and they think it was a suicide. So they obviously were very distraught. They immediately rushed to the airport, got on a plane, flew to San Francisco. Once they arrived at San Francisco, they talked to the police, and they asked about this friend. They said, was there anyone that was with him at the time? And they said, no, they didn't see anyone that was with him. And they thought that was kind of strange. This person who was really developed a strong bond with, wasn't with him at this particular time. So they finally went to the morgue, identified the body, but they also noticed something else that was a surprise to them. Their son only had one arm and one leg. Now, how many of us, put into the position of the parents, would have done the same thing? Now, you might think that you wouldn't have, but in reality, you never know, because sometimes situations, when they become your own situation, can cause you to make decisions that you really might normally not make. And how often do we love people who are very convenient to love, people that we share things with that are like us, and we don't like people who are inconvenient, maybe have a handicap, maybe they're just people we're uncomfortable being around. We tend to make friends with those people who look the same way we do, whether it's racially or maybe religiously, or they talk the same way we do, they're as smart as we are. Friendship is something that comes from the heart, and we don't really know exactly where it comes from, but we do know when it occurs, that someone becomes our friend. And it's really a gift, because when we become friends with someone, we achieve a connection. I guess the only stronger connection, of course, would be love, but we achieve a very strong connection with that person. And a friend is someone who can give you a reassuring word, can give you praise, can be with you when nobody else will be with you, can talk with you. A friend is a very special person. And going back to the parents, obviously they had a lot of love for their son, but they didn't share the same openness that their son did. Well, obviously their son, this was not a friend that their son had, but they didn't share the same openness with someone who they felt was handicapped, that they thought might be a little bit of a discomfort or inconvenience to their lives. And I would ask you to open up your heart to everyone that you meet, because everyone can be your friend. And also, I'd like to ask you to treat your friends as well as you would treat yourself. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Jim. Take a moment down on your balance, top part of